The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome. Once again, my name is Michael Kane. I am the Director of Advocacy here at Children's Health Defense. Today, we got an amazing show for you, the Monster Farm Bill. What do we do now? I will be talking to Sarah Starman of Friends of the Earth. The Farm Bill is worse than I even anticipated, than many of us did. There are so many poison pills, and it passed out of the Agricultural Committee. What does that mean? What do we do now? And then we have the fog of war, U.S.-Iran conflict, with the amazing Dr. Meryl Nass interviewing Brook, DeLorme. So if someone's going to take on the Iran war here on CHD TV, I'm glad it's Meryl Nass. So definitely make sure to stay here through to the end of this show. We got a good one for you. But first, as always, we have news headlines. Maha Institute just yesterday had an all-day summit on the massive epidemic of vaccine injury. Mark Gorton, who heads Maha Institute, kicked off the event. There were so many speakers. It was just unbelievable. From our own Dr. Brian Hooker to our CEO, Mary Holland. There's Del Bigtree, who kicked off the event. Mary followed him. Hours and hours and hours of material for you to look through, and it's worth doing. Here's just one clip I would like to show of our CEO, Mary Holland, yesterday at Maha Institute's MEVI Summit. Let's show that clip.
COVID is what brought us here, right? I'm one of the people who was, like Del, here long before COVID, but COVID is what has brought this movement together to make America healthy. And at the heart of the Make America Healthy Again movement are the people who were injured by vaccines and who said, we can't continue this program. So what were some of the absurdities during COVID? Like we said, the masks, the shots, the tests, the forced shutdowns, the school closures, the lockdowns in your home, the experimental toxic injections, the closing of houses of worship. Everything about it was a fiasco. And that's why Children's Health Defense and many other groups, Brownstone, who's here, Health Freedom Defense Fund, we are all joined together in something called COVID justice, because there has not been the reckoning that Del just spoke about. We must have a reckoning that at a minimum says that they won't do this again. They won't abrogate the Constitution and everything that we hold dear. So I've got some flyers here. You can sign a petition for a Senate resolution that they won't do this again, that they won't play the pandemic card to the detriment of the whole country and truly of the world.
covidjustice.org. If you have not signed the petition, please sign that petition. Maha Institute is now a principal member of this. IMA is a member. Brownstone, Health Freedom Defense Fund, Stand for Health Freedom, Autism Action Network, Children's Health Defense, 30 additional groups supporting Feds for Freedom, Vaccine Safety Research Foundation, and many, many, many more. Go to covidjustice.org. Make sure to sign this petition and share it. And tomorrow we are going to have an action, because we have tens of thousands of signatures on the petition, but now we need to talk to our senators and our representatives about that. So watch for that coming tomorrow. Dr. Joseph Ladapo, the Surgeon General of Florida, supports the COVID justice resolution. He retweeted about it. Accountability is important. Count me in. I hope that means Dr. Ladapo signed the COVID justice resolution. We greatly appreciate his support. Many other people have been voicing support for this all throughout the medical freedom movement. One of the reasons COVID justice is such an important thing is because an overwhelming majority of Americans support medical freedom. There's a new poll, almost 90% of U.S. voters support the right to refuse medical treatment. Let's show the graph that gets into this. Here's two questions. The top one, a personal decision about medical treatment, including vaccines, should never be used to deny that person's employment. 70% agree with that. 14% neutral, only 15%, 16% disagree with it. The bottom question, adult American citizens have the right to refuse medical treatment for themselves. 87.5% say yes to this. Just over 6% say no to it. There is a lot of propaganda out there right now making people think that medical freedom and vaccine choice is unpopular. That could be the furthest thing from the truth. This new poll, you should definitely check out the links in the show note below, in the show notes below, to go through the entire poll. It shows Republicans, independents, Democrats support medical freedom. This is something to lean into, not to shy away from going into the midterms. I hope MAGA Maha and anybody with ears to hear doesn't mess this up going into the elections. But, you never know. Politicians, who knows what they're going to do. In South Carolina, this was very good to see. The people showed up. South Carolina lawmakers side with parental choice in 2 vaccine votes. One of them says no institution can require any vaccine for any child under the age of 2, which is a very interesting, novel approach to legislating these things. And the other one was saying they would repeal the religious exemption of vaccination for the MMR vaccine only. This was largely as a response to a measles outbreak that is happening in South Carolina. We have gotten some photos from activists in South Carolina that attended. There's the Capitol. In South Carolina, there was a panel, measles outbreak, South Carolina 2025, 2026, and dozens of activists showed up and were able to voice their opinions, talk about their religious liberty, talk about their sincerely held religious beliefs. Most people wore red. Red was a sign for religious liberty, and that bill was shot down. The bill to repeal the religious exemption for the MMR vaccine is gone from South Carolina. That is not going to become law this session. Always want to pay attention. Always want to pay attention to what's happening, and we'll see what happens in the next session. I really appreciate everyone in South Carolina who showed up. Nearly 100 people showed up to the Capitol. That's what we need in all of these things. We need people showing up if we're going to be successful. Speaking of showing up, March 24th, 2 weeks from today, New York rally at the Capitol. Mary Holland, Tony Lyons, Sujata Gibson, Naomi Wolf, firefighter O'Brien Pastrana, who was injured by the COVID vaccine, and so many more. Deborah Sheldon, Bobby Ann Cox, myself, Jimmy Wagner, John Gilmore, the Spirit Drummers playing live percussion music. We are going to be rocking at the Capitol March 24th. In Albany. We need everybody to show up to that in New York, in the Northeast, if you can make it. We always have a lot of fun on these lobby days. We educate, we lobby, but we also celebrate, we dance. It's a really, really great time. I hope everyone can make it. Before we get into the monster farm bill, from our good friend Zen Honeycutt, she just put this out. Finally, some good news. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is investing heavily in research and regenerative agriculture. President Trump has committed $1 billion towards regenerative farming and reducing chemical use. The tide is turning to Maha. Okay, the tide is turning to Maha. We hope, we definitely hope, but we got one hell of a monster farm bill right in front of us that is not turning to Maha, and we need to deal with that. And for that, we need to talk to an expert. We have Sarah Starman with Friends of the Earth, who's been with us before. Sarah, it's great to have you on CHD TV. How are you this morning?
Good. It's good to be back, Michael. Thanks for having me again.
So it's good to see some good news out of HHS. Seems to usually come from HHS when it is good in this administration right now. But the farm bill, virtually overnight, at least to my understanding from what I saw when Elizabeth Kucinich posted a Substack about just how bad the farm bill had gotten, it seems to have morphed into something with multiple poison pills in it, and it did pass out of the Agricultural Committee. Why don't you just talk us through that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So as many of you may know, or some may not, the farm bill process is very long, and where it starts is with the House and the Senate making 2 different drafts of the bill. And so far, we only have a draft from the House. And the first step with that bill is the House Agricultural Committee writes it, and then they attempt to pass it out of committee. Normally, the Farm Bill is a really interesting bill because normally it's bipartisan and both parties work on it together. This is the least bipartisan Farm Bill I've ever seen. The vote on it was extremely split on partisan lines. Word on the street is that the two parties didn't work together at all. And what we saw is a Farm Bill stuffed with what we call poison pill riders, which are, riders attached to this bill. The Farm Bill is a must-pass bill. It's necessary to keep our food and farm system running. And so one strategy from some politicians is to stuff what are called poison pills in there and try to pass really unpopular legislation by attaching it to the Farm Bill, which must pass. And we saw a lot of poison pill riders in this, including provisions that would give liability shields to pesticide companies, which we've seen in other places, provisions that would preempt state and local authorities, so taking away the rights of states and municipalities to pass pesticide restrictions, and many other provisions that were giveaways to chemical corporations, as opposed to provisions that actually support American farmers and American consumers at the grocery store and people's health. So it was stuffed with poison pills.
So this is the beginning of the process. We're not near the end of the process. So I know myself and many other people are thinking, what now? What do we need to do now? Is there a call to action right now? Is there more that needs to happen before we can activate? Let people know what they should be doing and paying attention to now, or any actions, if there are any now.
I think so this just happened last week. The House bill, still with almost all of the poison pills attached, passed out of the House Agricultural Committee. And so it's very recent. And the first action I think that's most critical in this period is what we call name and shame, which is calling out the legislators who voted for the bad provisions in the bill and shaming them for that. And specifically, there was an amendment to strip out the pesticide liability language and the pesticide preemption that was introduced by Representative Shelley Pingree from Maine. And that was taken to a vote. And we know that every Republican on the House Agricultural Committee and one Democrat, Rep. Adam Gray from California, they all voted against this amendment. So they essentially voted to keep pesticide liability shields and keep pesticide preemption in the bill. And right now, we need to be calling out those legislators, both, calling them directly, calling their offices, sending emails, also posting on social media and tagging them, naming them and saying, hey, you voted the wrong way. This isn't what we want to see. This doesn't represent the interests of the American people. Shame on you for doing this. And then we can also lift up some of the leaders like Representative Pingree, Representative Thomas Massey also introduced some good amendments. We can lift up some of the folks who led on this issue and say, thank you for actually trying to protect people's health. And then later down the line, we'll have a lot more opportunities to influence the final Farm Bill before it passes out of the House and ultimately the House and Senate.
So this is a long process. The Farm Bill takes a long time. That's good and bad. It gives them time to stuff it with a lot, but it gives us time to gather ourselves, to do our actions. And as long as we're organized, I think we could have a pretty major impact. With the election coming up, controversial issues are difficult to deal with right before an election, and all of these people in the House, all of them are up for re-election. I have a question about the vote. I have seen at times where there's a vote where the name of the rep doesn't need to be placed to the vote. Did that happen in this case, or were the names documented in terms of who voted against getting rid of the pesticide liability shield?
I'm so glad you asked this question because this was actually, I don't want to call it a major victory, but it feels like a major victory to those of us who have worked on pesticides and chemical issues for a long time, because we so often get what's called a recorded vote on pesticide issues. The folks in the committee or in the House can opt to keep the vote private and not force members to vote on record. And often when it comes to pesticide issues, they do, to shield members of their party from public scrutiny and to avoid transparency. But leading up to the committee vote in the markup process, activists actually were calling members of Congress and saying, hey, this is one of the most important issues to us. We want you to vote on record. We deserve transparency. We deserve to see who's voting for liability shields and who's not. And in part due to that public pressure and the fact that we've raised the profile of this issue, we were able to push them to call a recorded vote. And so, yeah, we have a list of everyone who voted yes and no on this amendment. And that's how we know, for example, that all the Republicans and also the Democrat Representative Gray are the ones who voted for liability shields, and then all the other folks on the committee voted against it. So that is how we know that. And I think I would just emphasize that really demonstrates the power of our movement for pesticide reform, for healthy food and farming. We kind of flexed our muscles and we got this small victory, and now we just need to build on that and get some more substantive victories, like removing these bad sections.
Well, I agree with you. It's definitely a major victory in my view. People who don't do this all the time don't understand the process. Representative Pingree can't force a vote alone. She can't do it just because she feels like it, because as these meetings happen, the gravitas of all of the players and stakeholders are at play. The lobbyists, the White House, and then the people. So when Pingree feels the people calling and making it an issue, she's empowered now. She can use her political capital to demand that there is a vote on the record. Some of us are so jaded. We just say like, oh, Pingree's bought off. She's not. She's playing a game. There's a game that goes on in Washington D.C. and I've seen it Republican or Democrat, whatever the issue is, where they say, now make me go do this. I want to do this. Now make me go do this. I need your support. So I think it's a great sign. I think, like you said, it's a sign that this issue is elevating in prominence, and it's elevating for Democrats, Republicans, independents, everybody. It's one of those things I think will truly have an impact at the ballot in the midterms coming up.
I agree entirely. I mean, we see such broad support for pesticide reform. I think there's some great polling data that shows 87% of Americans favor banning pesticides that are banned in the European Union for health risks. We have great polling data showing that liability shields for pesticide companies are one of the most unpopular policies that anyone has ever tried to introduce. There is nobody who likes it except chemical companies themselves. And it's very interesting, that being the case, that we're seeing, Bayer, Monsanto, and other companies push, for these liability shields in so many avenues: federal legislation, state legislation, through the Supreme Court case. They're pushing it everywhere they can because they know it's unpopular, and they're going to have to try a lot of different avenues in order to get something to pass. So
Right. So CHD, we put out an action alert specifically about the pesticide liability shield. We put out a couple about those. This is still in the Farm Bill the way it is right now. But in addition to this, there was an extra step, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, banning states from taking action as well, too, so that this federal shield would preempt anything the states could do. Correct me if I'm wrong, or give us some detail on that.
Yeah, that is correct. Preemption is a really old tactic of the pesticide industry and other industries. So what they like to do is try to take away state authority to regulate pesticides, or local authority to regulate pesticides, or state and local authority to regulate other things. There are other provisions in this Farm Bill that try to preempt states' authority to regulate livestock products, and the restrictions you can put on animal products that people eat. So there are many poison pills in the Farm Bill that relate to preemption. And that's an attempt to conglomerate authority and conglomerate power at the federal level, where it's more easy for industry potentially to influence it in a single thrust, instead of, letting states and municipalities come to their own conclusions and pass their own legislations, which then is harder for polluting industries like the pesticide industry to deal with, because then they have to fight battles on many different fronts. So I think what we're seeing overall is, in the realm of pesticides and other realms, an effort by the industry to preempt state and local authority to make it easier for them to try to control the overall policy landscape. And that's something we should be looking out for, kind of across the board.
The last thing I want to end on here is that the Trump administration, unfortunately, despite a number of MAHA promises, seems to be all in on pesticide liability shields, not one, two, or three, multiple signs, not even just signs, using their muscle to really assist Bayer in particular, but the chemical industry broadly, to get these shields in. Why don't you talk a little bit about what the executive branch has done to use their muscle to actually assist the liability shields for pesticide companies?
Yeah, so I'll highlight two things that are really egregious that have both happened in the past month, unfortunately. The first is the executive order on glyphosate, which many folks have already heard about and are pissed off about, which basically the executive order is intended to help ramp up domestic production of glyphosate, which is a pesticide linked to cancers like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and is already the single most widely used pesticide in the US. So the executive order was designed to ramp up production, and also it invoked the Defense Production Act to shield pesticide companies from liability for manufacturing glyphosate. The scope of that is not entirely clear, which is a bit ominous, to be frank. The fact that we don't know how far that liability extends or what exactly that clause will do is very troubling. There was no reason for this executive order except to placate Bayer or as a giveaway to Bayer. And I think, shortly after this executive order, an expose was released from US Right to Know, showing that Bayer has deep ties to the administration. Bayer has spent millions of dollars lobbying this administration. There's a, ever revolving door between Bayer and the Trump administration. So we know that, Bayer has a lot of influence there and is spending a lot of money there. And of course, it's not too hard to connect the dots between Bayer's influence over the highest levels of our government and the giveaways to the company, like the executive order. And then the final thing I'll mention very briefly is just the amicus brief. The executive branch, the White House, also submitted an amicus brief to the Supreme Court in support of Bayer's court case, where they're attempting to say all of the cancer lawsuits that have been levied against us actually have no ground because the EPA never required a cancer label for our product. So any lawsuits saying that we failed to warn people about cancer-causing risks are groundless. And I honestly think that is really appalling. It's an absolutely egregious, thing for the White House to do, to say, yeah, we support Bayer in their bid to get legal immunity after. Yeah.
Also, Sarah, in addition to that, I believe the Department of Justice just submitted an amicus
Yes.
brief as it just never ends. It just kind of keeps coming in support of the pesticide liability shield. You have a lot of people in Maha trying to support the administration because there are things, especially out of HHS, we've seen that we like, but it starts to become hard as it just, continually builds up this support for just. Another thing is I come from medical freedom movement and vaccine choice movement. Once you hear the term liability shield, it just sets us off because we've dealt with the vaccine manufacturer liability shield for 40 years, and we've seen how terrible that has been as well, too. Sarah, tell people where to go and what to do to follow your great work and to keep up on what has to happen, what's going to happen next.
Absolutely. You can follow Friends of the Earth at friendsoftheearthfoe.org. We are always, mobilizing people to act on these issues. We put out press releases and blogs to keep people informed. We have actions that help you call and email your members of Congress. So go to our website, sign up for our email list, follow us, and we'll keep you informed about all the relevant updates in pesticide policy, healthy food and ag policy, and help you take your passion to action.
Sarah Starman, Friends of the Earth, thank you so much. It's always
Michael.
so educational and great to have you on the show. We'll certainly have you back sometime soon.
Great. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you so much. One of the things I want to point out about the executive order from Trump is it happened before war with Iran broke out. Now we're at war with Iran, and there are a number of people that are wondering what role China plays in this. And there are those who think China will back Iran, secretly already is providing intel beyond my pay grade. I'm not going to get into that. But if you look at what happened in Venezuela, if you look at this executive order that went into place, it makes me wonder, was the geostrategical plan that was being laid out, was this plan one thinking, hey, what if China does cut off critical chemicals, critical supplies to the United States, including glyphosate? Because if it was shut off overnight, that is a problem, actually, right? So when the executive order first came out, it was like, this makes no sense. This isn't going to happen. But then, boom, this major war conflict happens. Could there be a tie-in? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to tell you, if there was somebody that I wanted to analyze these things and I want to hear from regarding this recent war that just kicked off with Iran, it would be the amazing and the brilliant Dr. Meryl Nass. So let's turn it over to Meryl now.
Well, good morning, CHD. Today, we're going to talk about a very difficult subject, which is the war the US and Israel have initiated on Iran. And what I hope to do today is to help myself and my guest, Brook DeLorme, get in touch with our feelings about this. Despite the fact that we have so little reliable information about the war. So Brooke is going to ask me some questions, and I'm just going to start out and say, we don't really even know why this war is occurring. We've gotten about 10 different reasons from different members of the administration, and President Trump has said on many different times, different reasons for why the war had to happen, why it had to happen now. So we don't know why. We don't know what the goals are, because again, we've had different stories from different members of the administration, and we don't know what the costs are going to be for us, for the Iranians, for the Israelis. And the fact that there was no preparation, Americans were not educated about why there was a problem, why all this is happening beforehand, unlike basically all other wars in which Americans were led to believe, for instance, the Iraq War, where we were told they had weapons of mass destruction and could use them on us. Turned out they didn't. But at least some effort was made to actually get the American population to go along with a war. In this case, there has been no effort like that made. And at least 2/3 of the population is against this war. So what's going on? And can we figure out enough about it that is reliable that we can actually get in touch with how this makes us feel and what should we do? So Brooke is a wonderful person, a very knowledgeable spiritual person who is also on my board for Door to Freedom, and I have relied on her. Door to Freedom would not have happened without Brooke. So, Brooke.
Meryl, very nice to
Please.
see you. Would you like me to start by asking some questions?
You can, or you can talk about what you think is going on and how it's affecting you.
I'm frustrated by it, and I don't know what's going on. You and I have talked about the various potential reasons, and should we just start by naming some of them off?
Sure.
I've heard it's about the dollar. We've heard it's about restricting China's oil supply. We've heard it's about on behalf of Israel or on behalf of other nations. And we've heard it's an end times or a religious conflict.
Right. So
Yeah.
let's get into that a little bit. So because the Strait of Hormuz is closed, China is not getting its oil from the Gulf states or from Iran. But Iran is the entity that's closing the Strait of Hormuz. So if they want to allow ships to go through that are going to feed China oil, they can. And in fact, some ships now are flying Chinese flags openly in order to get through, and one did get through yesterday. So I think that is a false narrative about how we could stop China from getting oil. They also get a lot of oil from Russia, and they plan to get more from Russia. So that means we are actually helping Russia both to sell more oil because it's been embargoed. So Russia had to sell their oil at a steep discount. Now they get a premium. So the price that they're able to sell their oil for is now about 50% higher than it was 10 days ago. And they get to sell more of it. So that story doesn't work. Israel has gone into Lebanon again and again and again. Israel apparently wants to take over the land of Lebanon or southern Lebanon. Israel also went into western Syria when Syria collapsed, I think it was last year, and has carved out a chunk of Syria where there is an underground aquifer that is very valuable to Israel, because Israel, as well as the Gulf states, get a lot of their water from desalination. And as you know, the Israelis bombed a desalination plant on an island that belonged to Iran, and then Iran has attacked a desalination plant in Israel. So anyway, so Israel is trying to take over land. It's trying to take over the West Bank. Ben-Gvir, who is one of the most right-wing anti-Palestinian members of the Knesset and a minister in the government, suggested that all settlers or all Jews in Jerusalem carry guns. So we're seeing images of Gaza now, and I think that this is confusing because we're not talking about Gaza today, although Israel seems to be conducting a ethnic cleanse of Gaza. So that, yes, that is another piece of land. And Iran is the major power in this area with over 90 million people and a very developed military and a million people in the military. Iran stands between Israel and its bigger ambitions of taking over more land, more resources. And the United States has a similar goal, it seems. It wanted Greenland. It's talked about Iceland. It went in and kidnapped the chief of state of Venezuela, and now admits they took $100 million in gold bars out of Venezuela. They're getting a lot of oil out of Venezuela, and Venezuela also has many minerals, that rare earth minerals that the United States wants. So now we're seeing that no, we didn't kidnap the head of state in order to free the Venezuelans and make them richer. We went in there apparently to plunder their resources. And Venezuela is sitting on the largest store of oil, although it's not easy to extract. It's very thick. But in any event, it is the largest reserve of oil in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, so those are some of the reasons maybe we're making this war. It's not clear. Do we really want to free the Iranian people? The Iranian people were free in 1953 when Mossadegh, a democratically elected head of state, was ruling Iran, and the US and the UK went in, killed him, and installed the Shah of Iran, who then ruled with an iron fist with Savak, a very, very terrible secret police. There was no freedom under the US Shah of Iran's rule. So to say that we want to give the people freedom is somewhat of a oxymoron, I guess. Okay. So we don't really know why we went in, but it probably has something to do with reducing the power of Iran and stealing its resources. Next question.
Right. And it, as Michael Kane pointed out, it wasn't preceded by a false flag event of any clear measure, which is kind of unusual. So
Yeah.
how would you compare what could happen with this situation between the US and Iran to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, or even before that? We've talked about the comparison with Vietnam.
Well, I think both the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were wars for resources. And so the Department of Defense had calculated back 25 years ago or more, when we began that war, that Afghanistan was sitting on top of $2 trillion worth of minerals and other things. They needed Afghanistan or Iran for a pipeline that would bring oil and gas from the Caucasus, which was a huge resource of oil and gas right north of there, although the Russians have been tapping into that resource as well. We don't know how much is left, but there was a plan to build a pipeline. And so we spent 20 years in Afghanistan and left with nothing. The Iraq War was, it seems obvious, was about, since we were lied into it, was also about oil. And Iraq had a very large army at that time, had a very developed military. And so we wanted to weaken them. In fact, we had supported both Iraq and Iran militarily as they fought each other, trying to weaken both of them in their war of the early 1980s. So it's very complicated. I don't pretend to know everything. What's his name? Ted Postal, professor at MIT of Technology and Society, who is an expert on ballistic missiles and weapons, says that Iran does not have nuclear weapons, but they could, in a short time, develop nuclear weapons based on the already partially enriched uranium that they have. And they could make at least 10 bombs, and it wouldn't take very long. And that Khamenei, the head of state that we just assassinated, was against nuclear weapons. And now the head of state is his son, whose mother, father, sister, brother-in-law, wife, and possibly child were assassinated by us. And so he will have a lot more reason to maybe want to have a nuclear bomb and also fight to the death. Iranians are a very proud people. They have a different way of looking at things, maybe, than Americans. They're also fighting on their own territory, which we aren't. So that gives them a lot more reason to want to fight, win, or at a minimum, get revenge for what's being done to them. Go ahead.
Let's turn to feelings. How do you feel about, and how do you help others around you? Yeah.
I feel guilty. I feel like I'm back in Vietnam, where the Americans were fighting a war and we didn't know why. And there was a theory called the domino theory that we had to fight in Vietnam so the Chinese and the Russians didn't get to Australia. And it was a theory that had no factual basis. But in any event, turned out later, I've discovered, and most Americans don't know this, Vietnam too had a lot of offshore oil that was not being explored or developed at that time. And so looking back, I'm wondering if we were actually in Vietnam for the offshore oil. But in any event, Vietnam had a lot of people, and they were very determined, like the Iranians. They're very hard workers. They were determined not to give in and lose their freedom. They dug cities underground, practically with their bare hands, without power tools. And had to live underground while we carpet bombed them. So I went down into one of those tunnels when I was in Vietnam 30 years ago. And when you are fighting a population like that, you cannot win. You have to have many, many, many boots on the ground in order to win, because they will do anything to prevent you from winning. And so I see no winning, not that I'm sure what winning would be. And so I see just destruction. And I see the president and Pete Hegseth and some others like Lindsey Graham happy about the destruction they are wreaking on Iran. Now, is this Iran? Is this Tehran, or is this Gaza? This is Iran. Thank you. So I don't know why we should be celebrating this kind of destruction against a country that hasn't done anything to us. Maybe they were supporting terrorism they were supporting Hezbollah. Of course, Israel was supporting Hamas, or allowing Qatar to support Hamas. They weren't doing anything to us. They weren't attacking our bases in the Persian Gulf. And here we are basically testing our weapons, and we have suffered great losses. We've not been told that there's been incredible censorship, many tweets about the damage that has occurred, and have been taken down immediately. So various friends of mine have sent me information, and when I go to look at the tweet, it's gone. And I sent out a tweet yesterday, and it was immediately gone. And in Israel, there's a 5-year penalty if you send anyone video or photos of the destruction that's taking place in Israel right now. So we don't know. George Galloway, who's a former member of parliament in the UK, has said there are 500 people, American soldiers, or not soldiers necessarily, because they've bombed our bases, they've bombed our embassies, they've bombed CIA stations. The Iranians have. So there may be hundreds and hundreds of Americans dead. He says there have been many flights to Landstuhl, which is an American base in Germany where we have the #1 hospital for taking care of injuries. There were people from Afghanistan and Iraq would be airlifted to Landstuhl. Now they have shut down OBGYN and some other parts of the hospital, apparently to take care of the injured people from the Persian Gulf area and Iran area, and maybe Israel. Israel's hospitals are supposed to be filled up now with people who have been injured. So, so what's the good? What's the good? I mean, where can we find any good?
Let me ask a question, which is, do you think it's realistic for the US to take a pacifist and non-interventionist position as a general stance?
I think that every country needs a military to protect itself. I mean, it's a jungle out there, and we're the ones who are turning it into a jungle. We're ignoring all the rules of war. We have rules of war, both domestic law and international law. And the United States is just tossing all that aside. Bombing a school or a hospital is illegal under international law. And there's humanitarian law. We're even when you pick up, when you take over an area and you now have prisoners, you're not allowed to execute them. You're not allowed to torture them. According to our own domestic law, you have to take care of them. You have to feed them. You have to give them medical care, as well as the civilians in the area. So, I mean, we're just breaking all these laws right and left. It's against domestic law, U.S. law, to assassinate a head of state, and yet there's Khomeini. He's assassinated. So if there's ever a legal reckoning, which there likely won't be, everybody from the president on down who has signed off on these orders could find themselves, in a jury box and in jail. If we were to lose a big war, if this turned into World War III and the United States lost, these people would all be facing, a court-martial or some other trial.
Yeah.
But so I think it's necessary to have a military as a deterrent, and militaries like to test their weapons and test their soldiers in war, and so sometimes that is one of the reasons why things happen. I think fighting back is justified, but there are lots of kinds of warfare that are not justified, such as blowing up those oil depots and raining down toxic materials on the 10 million people who live in Tehran and the surrounding areas. We wouldn't like it if somebody blew up, say, a nuclear power plant, and we had to deal with inhaling all that, radioactive material for goodness knows how many years, or other toxic materials. If an enemy, blew up the train in Ohio, we would be striking them with weapons of some kind.
Right. Do you see this war as somehow tied to the Great Reset, like the globalist program?
Yes. So I think that there are different factions that all would like to take over the world.
Yeah.
I think there is one faction that was, using the WHO and trying to use public health to basically gain the power to direct all the nations of what they must do during medical emergencies or health emergencies, which could be couldn't even necessarily be a health emergency. It could be just what they claim is a climate emergency, and then every country has to do what the Director General of WHO says. So we've stopped that, we think. But so that's one group, and Bill Gates was involved with them. Then and many of the European leaders. Then there seems to be the Trump group, which through brute force and through alliance with Israel wants to take over the Persian Gulf region and or take over some of the resources of that region, maybe because we have allies there too. Do we want to take them over, or do we want to leave things open for Israel to take over because we're no longer going to be defending them because our bases have been destroyed and maybe we weren't ever defending them? I think so. There's that group. And then we also wanted to destroy the BRICS, which was an alternative to the dollar. So a lot of trade is now not being carried out in the dollar. Most trade in the world is not being dollar denominated. There's a lot that is being traded in Chinese yuan. And so Iran was part of the BRICS group, and this was trying to put a wedge between the different BRICS countries and weaken the BRICS nations. I would say that China and Russia also were giving vaccines to their population during COVID. I don't at all feel that they are any different than the United States, which imposed these poisonous vaccines on us. But I think they too would be very happy if they got to take over the world, either singly. I think China would like to do it by itself. But right now, we have pushed them into each other's arms. Even though they were competing in many ways, they now realize they have to work together to defeat the United States. And both China and Russia are allegedly providing a lot of intelligence to Iran and helping them direct their bombs, for instance.
Well, what do you think we average people can do?
Well, I think it's really important to try to figure out what's going on and not to allow the censorship and the baloney stories that are coming out of the newspapers every day, that don't believe them. Realize that this is really serious, that we're breaking a lot of rules and laws and norms. And you don't want to expand the norms for war. You don't want to make it okay where anything goes. You don't want it to be okay for the enemy to use chemical and biological weapons on us or nuclear weapons on us, for example. And you have to realize that Iranians are people just like us. They love their children. We love ours. We have fortunately not experienced a war on our territory since the Civil War. And in the North, we didn't even experience that.
Right.
So Americans don't know what it's like to know whether you're not going to be able to go to sleep in your bed at night, whether your house will be bombed. Your head of state kidnapped or assassinated. But we should try to see how would it feel if that happened to us? What would we feel if we were in the shoes of somebody in Iran right now? I mean, they just want freedom. They just want to have the ability to build up their economy.
Right.
They want to raise their families. How can we end this? And, I have to also ask the question, is our president doing anything that's good for America? And they haven't so far given us any justification for how this is going to be good for America, although it may be good for people in the oil business and the banking business, because they're going to have to refinance repairs of all of these horrible, thousands of buildings that have been destroyed. Or is he completely owned by the Israelis or by the banksters and the oil people? Or has he gone mad? Is he out for vengeance sake? And we don't know what it is. But if we have a president who's gone mad and is unreliable and not only is lying to us about what's going on, why he's doing it, what the costs are, et cetera, should we be pushing for the amendment that asks members of the cabinet to go against him, or pushing for another impeachment? I think those are questions we have to figure out. Is this guy going to, is he going to drop a nuclear bomb on Iran? Is he going to start World War III? I mean, does he need to be stopped? And I don't know the answers. I'm not saying that he does, but I'm saying that it's important that we ask those questions, and that we allow ourselves to feel what it would feel like to be an Iranian, to be somebody in Qatar or Bahrain or Oman. What it would feel like if you were a soldier for the United States and you're being asked to risk your life in aid of expanding Greater Israel or destroying a country that has not attacked us. How would that feel to you? And how would it feel to be a member of the US military who is stuffing T-shirts and underwear down the toilets of the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier because you don't want to go to this war? You want to disable your aircraft carrier by destroying the toilets, which has happened over and over again on that aircraft carrier. So what do they know that we don't know?
Right.
I would encourage or get in touch with your feelings. We stuff them. We don't understand, we don't have knowledge of what exactly is going on. It's so painful. We don't want to deal with it.
Right.
But, we let the Vietnam War go for, I don't know, about 8 years. And 10 years maybe, because people didn't really come to grips with what it meant for that long a time. And the sooner we can come to grips with this, the sooner hopefully it can end. And anything else? Brooke, how do you feel?
I think what you said is very true. And it seems like so many of the reveals of the past decade have essentially been things that were hinted at, and yet people didn't want to look at them or think about them. And now COVID happened, and we're looking at the Patriot Act, or the Epstein files happened, and we're looking at that history. So, yeah, trying to look at things and feel things sooner rather than later makes sense.
Well, I thank you. I hope the audience is pondering this. Start talking to your spouse, your friends, your relatives, your neighbors. Ask them what they think. Get in touch with your feelings, share information, and let's try to get this solved in as good a way as possible, as fast as possible. And thank you, Brooke, and everybody. Thank you to the audience very much. And thanks for the technicians at CHD.
Thank you.
Tell us your name, please.
Sylvia.
Okay, so Sylvia has an injury that affects her voice. So she's written down, and various other things that she's going to tell us about. So she's written her testimony down, and she's going to read it to you all right now. Go ahead, Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Polly, Robert Kennedy Jr., and all the crew and staff for providing a platform for the vax-injured and survivors of loved ones who have died. It means so much to us who have been shamed, canceled, and humiliated, to have a place to share and inspire others to keep the faith and fight the good fight. My heart goes out to you. What your mama's heart has gone through with your boy, I can't even imagine, Polly. Thank you, Del Bigtree and staff as well, for being brave with the movie Vaxxed. It opened my eyes and shifted my nurse perspective regarding the truth about vaccines. My name is Sylvia, and I'm sharing my story, hoping to have a positive impact and inspire someone to do the next right thing. As a little girl, I always dreamed of being a nurse. My mom nurtured this dream, which she also had. But with 6 kids and not much money, my mom and dad did the best they could, but she wasn't able to fulfill it. She encouraged me to study hard so I could receive college scholarships, and I achieved our dream at age 21. What a celebration. My passion was helping and encouraging my patients through their difficult health challenges. The gift of serving others is so fulfilling. When you are at your very low in life, look around you. There's always someone in a worse situation. Just reach out and help them, and you'll be amazed at what happens. To inspire others, don't show them your superpower, show them theirs. I never ever imagined the nightmare of becoming a chronic patient myself. My friends called me the picture of health athlete. My husband Mark and I cycle centuries, which are 100-mile bike rides, in the mountains of the Sequoia National Forest, that was our backyard, and the Central California coastline by Monterey, San Luis Obispo. I ran 3 miles in 30 minutes, a couple times per week. We were training for our master scuba diving certificate with a small boat we had that we would take to Catalina out of Long Beach, and keeping up with our 3 Weimaraners, going camping and hiking. We had just celebrated my 50th birthday in Hawaii, snorkeling, climbing Diamond Head, and as many luau's as we could, living our best life and loving it. This is a picture of There's a picture of us at Diamond Head, and we went to as many luau's as we can. We were living our best life and loving it. A few months later, I had an annual physical. My doctor said her computer showed I was due for a Tdap booster vax, and as a nurse, I was trained that vaxes were a good thing. I had no idea yet that there were countless people chronically injured and even some fatalities from this. A few days later, I was profoundly weak, exhausted, in bed most of the day, very dizzy, short of breath. I had laryngitis, which I still have this paralyzed vocal cord with this annoying voice, but a bad cough that was headed for pneumonia, hypersensitive to touch, especially around my diaphragm area. My chest and kidneys were burning like fire, like somebody had a blowtorch they lit and put in there. It was so painful. The doctor prescribed antibiotics, which helped my cough, but then I got a urinary tract infection. Then I got more antibiotics, and then I got a fever of 102 for 3 days, and I couldn't shake it. I knew there was something seriously wrong. I just couldn't pinpoint it. When my fever finally broke, I walked outside to give the horses some carrots. Suddenly, my legs became paralyzed, and I fell to the ground. Mark, my husband, found me and carried me inside. I thought I was having a stroke, and as he was taking my blood pressure, I slumped from the chair onto the floor. I was in and out of awareness, trapped in my body, just locked in because I couldn't move, but I could hear Mark and the 911 operator talking. My diaphragm felt like it was being torn and squeezed by a tight tourniquet, making it so hard to breathe. Mark said I was breathing only 4 times per minute. I was hospitalized almost 2 weeks, mostly on bed rest, and when the physical therapist assisted me out of bed finally, I was shocked and puzzled that unless I looked down at my feet, I couldn't walk. I didn't know where they were. Multiple trips to the ER, baffling doctors with similar symptoms many times. My autoimmune system was so damaged that it was attacking my brain, nerves, joints, liver, kidneys, adrenal glands. My infection-fighting cells were really low. My thyroid, I was hospitalized another week. About 3 years later, because of that, I almost went into thyroid storm and coma. I had low blood pressure. I was unable to stay upright more than 45 minutes at a time because I would get this thorax flexion and I just couldn't stay up. I was so weak. Frequent crash episodes of paralysis. I was getting paralyzed every single day. Just anything would trigger it. Looking left, reading, noises, sound, lights. And I still have this whisper voice to a paralyzed vocal cord. Poor circulation. I had excruciating pain in the back of my head, neck, spine, and diaphragm. My brain's not what it used to be, but I'm still praying and believing for more miracles. 8 months after that happened, I was still in total denial and shock that the Tdap vaccine was the reason I almost died. I reached out to my friend Louie, a holistic nutritionist who helped me detox, and a functional neurologist who began to reset my neurological system with many treatments, including cold laser therapy to my brain, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, and a massage chair, among many others. I'm miraculously off most of my medications that my doctor said I would be on for the rest of my life. So I'm learning how to lie down before a crash paralysis episode. The last one was October 2023, and I plan only 2 to 3 outings per week since it takes 2 to 3 days to recover. I'm still on bed rest about 65% of the day, and I still use oxygen, and I have to recline in the truck on the way over here on oxygen just to be able to make it for an hour or two. My damaged cells don't uptake the oxygen and glucose well, and exercise actually causes relapses. So I've cried many tears over the guilt that I took the shot, but I just didn't know. We weren't taught that in nursing school. I was at first in total denial and shocked that it was the reason I almost died. And every one of you has a thing to overcome and conquer. I love you, and you need to love you. My goal is to encourage, uplift, and inspire you through my story. God forgave me, and I am overwhelmed by his love and mercy. Please hear me. Do not run away. Run to his embrace. He loves you too much to leave you where you are. Choose happy and make it a great day. Make your mess your message. My favorite Bible verse is Isaiah 41:10. He upholds me with his righteous right hand. Mark is my hero, man of God. He is my best friend, my nurse, my chef, my taxi driver, my everything. His love and devotion through this catastrophic and debilitating 7 years has helped me to keep moving forward daily. Although this vax injury has been catastrophic and debilitating to my life, finances, and career, healing prayers have gifted me a miracle, and I count my blessings every single day. The tide is turning. As many more news outlets are reporting truth. Whistleblowers are coming forward. Video footage of sports heroes just dropping. And just this week, even Senator Ron Johnson had a 4-hour roundtable discussion, which Del Bigtree aired live. The veil is being lifted off blind eyes to see. My favorite song is Overcomer by Mandisa. Look it up, it'll help you. Keep the faith, fight the good fight, and carry the light into this dark, chaotic world. Make your life count. What will they say about you when you're gone? What will be your eulogy? Decide to change your story for good. And I wanted to show you not so very pretty photo because they wouldn't believe me that I was having these ugly episodes. You could see my left eye there is starting to disappear into my head, and the other one's on its way. It was right before I got paralyzed. I started asking my husband Mark to document what was happening, and we have multiple videos. And thank God for Dr. Judy Mikovits and Dr. Vanessa Passoff. They have actually helped me so much back in 2019 because I couldn't go. Del Bigtree's Vaxxed bus, they put my name on there, and now I'm here with the Children's Health Defense bus, and I'm going to put my name on there. Thank you so much.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.